wife because they definitely left that part out. I'm an anthropologist, and here's what they don't teach you in school. Her name was Asherah. She was worshipped across ancient Canaan. She was God's wife. We have the receipts. Archaeological finds and early texts that literally say Yahweh and his. But as male-dominated monotheism took over, Asherah got the boot. Her name was completely scrubbed.
No, Asherah wasn't scrubbed from the Bible. It literally mentions her in Judges. Hey everyone, I'm Josiah and I study comparative mythology. So in Judges 3:7, it openly says that the Israelites fell into idolatry, worshiping both Baal and Asherah. She was a Canaanite goddess, and the Bible calls it rebellion, not revelation. And the phrase, his Asherah, doesn't mean that Asherah was God's wife. We know from the Old Testament that the Israelites were mixing the local Canaanite worship with worship of Yahweh. This is clearly stated. It's not hidden. It's far more likely that Yahweh and his Asherah is a remnant of this mixing that we have historical context for from the actual biblical text. So no, you don't have the receipts. You have bias and cherry-picked archaeology.
Pretty much. I mean, it doesn't make sense that God having a wife and he kills her servants and strikes down her altars. Doesn't make any sense. Plus, you see in the Bible, you could look for that all the nations, all the gods of the nations are idols. I mean, they're not gods at all. They're not real. It's just demons hiding behind created objects of stone and other metals of the earth. Okay. God, one of the attributes of the God of the Bible is sovereign. He's over creation, man, woman, animals. Okay, where the animals of the animals of the land, animals that can fly, animals of the sea. He's above the oxygen that we breathe, the rain, the air, everything. He doesn't need a wife. He created man and woman. He's above man and woman. He's above creation. He doesn't need a wife. Listen to this one now.
Hannah James, I don't even know if that's the right way to say her name. She's like, what, Australian or something? Or British?
Yeah.
Anyway, she gets on there and she's telling us this wonderful story about how God has a secret wife that got erased from history. Oh my gosh. And she throws up several translations trying to get us to believe that she's like kind of credible or whatever. So let's just give her some context here.
So she said Asherah is God's wife and that she's been erased from the Bible and not mentioned except for in the Hebrew text. Well, I recognize the name from when Elijah was on Mount Carmel in 1 Kings 18:16. He said, in 19, he said, summon the people from all over Israel and meet me on Mount Carmel. Bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So he assembled these people together to try and prove to them that God is the one true God. So he said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him.
So,
implying that Baal and Asherah are
and she gods. Had even said that in the video, she says that God was known as El, which was the god of Cana or something like that. And that's like not it.
It's a different god.
It's a different god.
So long story short, he tells the prophets of Baal and Asherah to try and burn up this burnt offering if Baal or Asherah can make it happen. And obviously it doesn't happen. And he kind of mocks them a little bit. It's kind of funny. And then soaks down the offering that he brought forth with water 3 times, and then God burns up the offering, the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and dried up all the water around it.
So I know we're in like a woke culture or whatever, and like feminism is power, but just because somebody thinks that they're credible, like, read other things.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of these people, they want to believe in this, make God like he is like us. He's not. He says that my ways are not your ways. Your thoughts are not my thoughts. Okay. Like I said before, God is sovereign. That's the thing with all these other gods. These so-called gods, they're not sovereign. It's like, let's say Marvel Thor. He's the god of lightning. That's it. Lightning. All right. He can't raise the dead, part the seas, turn the water into blood. He can't do the things Yahweh can do. Jesus could do. Yahweh, Jesus, turn water into wine. Okay. God and Jesus are the same. Yahweh and one and the same. You can't compare the two, Thor is just the god of lightning, and Zeus the god of lightning. They all have like a separate thing. That's just one thing they're good at. That's it. When you have the God of the Bible, he's the God of everything: life, death, creation. All right. Making man in his own image and likeness. That's the true and living God. Self-sustaining, sovereign. Okay. There are things that, people like to just lie about God, and it's not going to work. It's not.
Not walked in my statutes, nor have you executed my ordinances, but you have acted in accordance with the ordinances of the nations around you. 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 15. They rejected his statutes and his covenant which he made with their fathers, as well as his warnings that he gave them. And they followed vanity, that is, false gods, idols, and became vain, empty-headed. They followed the pagan practices of the nations which surrounded them, although the Lord had commanded that they were not to do as they did. God warned Israel not to worship Canaan's gods before they entered the promised land. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 14 through 15. You shall not follow other gods, any of the gods of the peoples who surround you.
Okay. The Israelites were told not to do that, and they did it anyway. All right. And people started mixing and taking things from the pagan religions and mix it with the religion that God gave them, Yahweh gave them. And this is where you have the nonsense of God having a wife.
For the Lord your God who is among you is a jealous, impassioned God, demanding what is rightfully and uniquely his. Otherwise, the anger of the Lord your God will be kindled and burned against you, and he will destroy you from the face of the earth. The Jewish law explicitly forbade reverence of Asherah. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 21. You shall not plant for yourself an Asherah of any kind of tree or wood beside the altar of the Lord your God, which you shall make. Judges chapter 6, verse 26 depicts the collapse of an Asherah pole by using it to fuel the fire of a sacrificial offering to the Lord. Judges chapter 6, verse 26. And build an altar to the Lord your God on top of this mountain stronghold, with stones laid down in an orderly way. Then take the second bull, and offer a burnt sacrifice using the wood of the Asherah which you shall cut down. When Asa reigned in Judah, he expelled the male cult prostitutes, sodomites, from the land, and removed all the idols that his fathers, Solomon, Rehoboam, and Abijam made.
They don't tell you about this. You know, they try to make, that's another thing, they try to make these idols grand and try to make them, they try to make them wonderful, and oh, it was just this big bad Yahweh. He was the bully here, and he picked on poor Asherah and the other guys. Meanwhile, these other guys were into temple prostitution, sodomy, all types of disgusting crap, human sacrifice of babies. They don't want to talk about that for some reason.
He also deposed his great-grandmother Maacah from being queen mother, because he had made a horrid, obscene, vulgar image for the goddess Asherah. Asa cut down her horrid image and burned it by the brook Kidron. 1 Kings chapter 15, verses 12 through 13. The Lord had given the Jews the command to demolish and remove all of the high places and sacred sites across the territory. But Israel disobeyed God and continued to worship idols, even introducing the cult of Asherah into the temple in Jerusalem. Ahab transferred 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah into Israel, so the people could worship the pagan gods that belonged to his wife Jezebel. 1 Kings.
And that's how all this mess got started. Okay, let's look into the Asherah poles.
What is an Asherah pole? Have you ever wondered about the significance of sacred trees in ancient religious practices? One fascinating aspect is the Asherah pole. So, what exactly is an Asherah pole? An Asherah pole is a sacred tree or pole that played a vital role in the religious practices of ancient Canaanites. This pole was dedicated to the goddess Asherah, who was often linked to fertility and was thought to be a consort of various gods, including Baal and, in some contexts, Yahweh. These poles served as physical representations of Asherah's presence and were typically erected near places of worship. The Hebrew Bible mentions Asherah poles, referring to them as Asherim. These poles were viewed as symbols of idolatrous worship, and the Bible often condemns their use. The presence of Asherah poles was seen as part of pagan practices that conflicted with the worship of the one true God. Historically, Asherah poles were part of a broader religious landscape in the ancient Near East. The existence of these poles near sacred sites reflects the diverse religious practices of the time. The Israelites faced significant challenges in maintaining their monotheistic faith amid the surrounding polytheistic cultures. The mention of Asherah poles in biblical texts serves as a reminder of this struggle. It highlights the ongoing tension between fidelity to God and the allure of neighboring pagan practices. Understanding the role of Asherah poles helps clarify the religious conflicts described in the Bible, especially regarding the worship of false gods. In summary, Asherah poles were not just simple objects. They were deeply embedded in the religious practices of ancient peoples. They represented a complex relationship between worship, culture, and the challenges of maintaining a singular faith in a world filled with diverse beliefs. So, next time you think about sacred trees, remember the Asherah pole.
This is what they say, like, God had a wife for. This is what it doesn't make sense for him to have a wife. Also, why would he have a wife with somebody that's a consort of many other gods? She was a prostitute. Asherah was a prostitute. This is why you had temple prostitutes. Okay? And it's like, with these with Yahweh is always rightness, good. You have to have a good character. You had to have he made sure you walk straight, okay? But the other gods, there was paganism, all right? There was sodomy, there was prostitution. That's the thing. Did God have a wife? Was God married? Was the Old Testament revised to hide evidence that God ruled alongside a heavenly queen? These questions are in the news this week due to a flurry of stories about the alleged relationship between Yahweh and the ancient Near Eastern fertility god Asherah, drawing on ancient inscriptions that mention Yahweh and his Asherah. Some scholars, notably William Dever in Did God Have a Wife? Archaeology and Folk Religion in Ancient Israel, have in recent years, posted that ancient Israelites worship Asherah and other deities alongside Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament. Now others have taken this a step further and claimed that Yahweh's supposed wife Asherah was later edited out of the Bibles by scribes with a monotheistic agenda. These theories sound a bit shocking at first. Read and most of the articles reporting on them this week spin them as a damaging blow to Christian understanding of God and the Bible. But on a closer examination, these theories don't seriously challenge what the Old Testament tells us about the ancient Israelite religion. That the ancient Israelites worship many different gods is not news. It's not news to anyone who has read the Old Testament. Although God revealed himself to his people as the one and only true God, even singling out Asherah worship for condemnation, the Israelites, surrounded by other nations that worship many gods, constantly backslid into idolatry. This idolatry didn't always take the form of an outright denial of God, rather than denying Yahweh. The Israelites would often start worshiping other deities like Asherah alongside Yahweh, or sometimes they would worship Yahweh in a way that he had expressly forbidden. Much of the Old Testament describes the forbidden worship of pagan gods like Asherah and the Baals, and the failure of Israel's leaders to outlaw such cults. This was a recurring theme for the biblical prophets. One of the most vivid passages in Jeremiah describes God's amazement at Israel's constant backsliding into idol worship, despite all that God had done for them. This is what the Lord says. What fault did your ancestors find in me that they strayed so far from me? They followed these worthless idols and became worthless themselves. They did not ask, where is the Lord who brought us out of Egypt and lead us through the barren wilderness, through the land of deserts and ravines, land of drought and utter darkness, a land where no one travels and no one lives. I brought you into a fertile land and to eat its fruit and rich produce. But you came and defiled my land and made my inheritance detestable. The priests did not ask, where is the Lord? Those who deal with the law did not know me. The leaders rebelled against me. The prophets prophesied by Baal, following worthless idols. So to the question, did the ancient Israelites worship other gods like Asherah alongside Yahweh? The answer is clear. They certainly did. But what is also clear is that the Bible repeatedly and unequivocally condemns this, describing these pagan gods as nothing more than lifeless idols. That's what they were. They were lifeless idols, okay? They can't see, they can't hear, they can't speak. They're dumb idols. That's in the Old Testament. You can look that up. Eyes that can't see, ears that can't hear. To the more controversial question, did God have a wife? The answer is also clear. Nowhere in the Bible is that even hinted at. And people who claim this was the case must post a conspiracy theory in which huge chunks of the Bible were retroactively rewritten to falsify the record. There is no manuscript evidence suggesting an earlier version of Israelite history that endorsed polytheism. Scholars continue to debate the development of Israel's understanding of God's unique revealed monotheism, but the burden of proof lies on the critics to demonstrate that this is more plausible than simply accepting the Bible text we have as genuine. But there is some nuance to this last question. The Bible clearly doesn't touch that Yahweh had a wife, but did the ancient Israelites believe that he did? Did the ancient Israelites believe that he did? It's not hard to imagine that some of them did. The Bible doesn't sugarcoat the Israelites' repeated embrace of idolatrous beliefs, in contrast to the official doctrine that they were taught. If the Israelites imagined Yahweh as a golden calf and set up Asherah's poles in God's temple during the flirtations with polytheism, it's possible some of them cast Asherah as Yahweh's divine consort as well. But whatever errant beliefs crept into Israel folk religion, the clear and consistent teaching of the Bible is that God has neither divine rivals nor equals. Okay? Yeah, because God would say, God of the Old Testament said, I am the Lord your God, and beside me there is no other. You could look that up. Okay? It's just kind of, it basically, he doesn't have any rivals. He doesn't. All the idols, all the gods of the nations are idols. They're just demons hiding behind the stone statues, or they would hide behind human beings. Okay? They're powerful, but when it comes to the God of gods, they back off. All right? But God does have a bride, all right? And that bride, all right, is the church. Let's look into that. Let's look into the scriptures. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 25 to 27. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave his life for himself, up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed by the washing of the water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle, or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Okay? Revelation chapter 19, verses 7 to 9. Let us rejoice and exult and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It was granted her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and pure. For the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints. And the angel said unto me, write this, blessed are those who are invited into the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true words of God. Okay. And here are some attributes of the bride. Okay. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2. For I feel a divine jealousy for you, since I have betrothed you to one husband, to present you as a pure virgin in Christ, clean, unspotted from the world. Okay? No spot of the world. Revelation chapter 21, verse 2. And I saw a holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Okay? John chapter 3, verse 29. The one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoice greatly at the bridegroom's presence. Therefore, this joy of mine is now complete. Okay? So, God does have a bride. Okay. And that is the body of Christ. That is what he has. And there's a lot here. I will leave the links in the description box. All right. And you can look at them. Okay. But that's about it. God has a bride. All right. That's what he has. So I hope this was a blessing towards you. Peace and blessings. All right. And I hope this blesses you to be more diligent in studying and research of the faith, because the devil's children are busy and they really are trying to defeat Christianity, and they can't defeat Christianity. You can't defeat biblical Christianity. You could defeat Catholicism, you could defeat Jehovah's Witness, you could defeat Seventh-day Adventists, but you cannot defeat Christianity rooted in the Bible. All right? Being born again of the Spirit of God. You can't defeat that. Peace and God bless.